Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we sift through complex source material and bring you the core knowledge fast.
Glad to be here.
Today, we're really getting into something often ignored, the deep connection between emotion, seduction, and power, especially at work.
It's fascinating, isn't it? Because the whole push for professionalism often tells us to, well, suppress all that, to pretend it doesn't exist.
Exactly, but the sources we've looked at are clear. Business is relationships. You can't separate them.
Nope. That's the fundamental truth we keep bumping up against.
So our mission today is pretty clear. We want to give you the insights on why your feelings, not just logic, drive your biggest career moves.
And how intimacy, and we mean close connection, not necessarily romance, really shapes professional life.
Plus, why workplace conflict often isn't about the stated issue at all. It's usually masking deeper emotional stuff.
We should probably start by tackling that image of the super rational, cool-headed leader. You're the one from movies.
Oh, yeah, the
Yeah.
unflappable executive.
Well, the sources say that person basically doesn't exist. Leaders are highly emotional.
Right, and projects get off the ground because people are passionate, because they're genuinely enthusiastic, not just because the numbers added up on paper.
It's that energy, that commitment that comes from emotion.
Okay, so let's dig into where this all starts. The brain. Daniel Goleman's work on emotional intelligence really opened this up, didn't it?
It really did.
Yeah.
He talked about that interplay, that constant negotiation between the limbic system, our sort of primal emotional memory center, and the neocortex.
The neocortex being the more rational, analytical part.
Exactly. But here's the kicker from the neurobiology, something scientists discovered that's crucial.
What's that?
Information coming in from our senses, sight, sound, everything, it hits the amygdala first.
The amygdala, that's the emotional memory hub.
That's the one. It tags the incoming data with emotional significance before it even gets processed by the rational neocortex.
Wow, so it's not like we think rationally and then emotion interferes. Emotion gets the first look.
Precisely. We're essentially thinking with both parts simultaneously. But the emotional system gets a head start. It colors our perception right from the beginning.
That changes everything.
It does. And get this. The sources point out that if someone actually loses access to those emotional memories, maybe through injury, their ability to make decisions just collapses.
Even simple decisions.
Yeah. They can analyze options logically, but they can't choose. They lack that gut feeling, that emotional context that tells them which option feels right based on past experience.
So emotion isn't just static on the line. It's actually vital information. It's knowledge.
Absolutely critical knowledge. And trying to suppress it, which we're often encouraged to do, especially at work, it means you're actively ignoring important data. And that, unsurprisingly, leads to worse decisions.
Makes sense. The sources also mention that emotion often signals a gap, right? Between how things are and how we want them to be.
Exactly. The bigger the gap or the bigger the perceived change needed, the stronger the emotion. It's a signal flare.
So being emotionally mature isn't about not feeling things.
Not at all. It's defined in the research as the ability to actually sit with emotional discomfort, maybe even pain, and listen to it.
Listen to it as information.
As vital information about that gap, what needs attention, what's not aligned.
Okay, that's the internal landscape. But how does this play out when we connect with other people? This is where the idea of seduction comes in, and it sounds, well, a bit provocative in a business context.
It does sound provocative because we usually think of seduction in, let's say, a negative or purely romantic way. Tempting someone, maybe manipulating them.
Right.
But the research we looked at frames it differently, more neutrally. It's simply the process by which people build commitment.
Commitment to what, though?
To relationships that feel emotionally safe
Yeah.
and, crucially, equitable, fair. And this process happens everywhere, not just in dating.
Okay, so let's take romance off the table for a second. How does this seduction process work in, say, building a strong working relationship or a close friendship? The sources mention stages.
Yeah, 4 stages are outlined. Stage 1 is pretty basic, just providing access, opening the door a little, sharing some information, signaling you're open to connecting.
Makes sense. You have to start somewhere. What's stage 2?
Stage 2 is about gaining insight into the other person's other important relationships. Who do they trust? What are their values outside of this specific interaction? You get a sense of the whole person.
Okay, building a fuller picture.
Yeah.
Then stage 3.
This is where the emotional core really comes in. It's about providing mutual emotional support, offering encouragement, maybe a bit of sincere flattery, protecting their ego a bit, that reciprocal validation.
That part about flattery and ego protection, Does that risk feeling manipulative in a professional setting?
It could be, if the intent isn't genuine or the goal isn't mutual benefit. But if you're aiming for a genuinely equitable, supportive relationship, then it's part of building trust and connection. It's about showing you value them.
Okay, reciprocity is key. And the final stage.
Stage 4 is where things solidify. You clarify shared goals, you make explicit commitments, maybe engage in small rituals.
The rituals like?
Could be anything from a formal handshake on a deal to just having that regular coffee chat to brainstorm, things that signify we're in this together.
So this whole cycle, these 4 stages, they build what the sources call intimacy.
Right. But intimacy in the sense of close friendship or deep connection, not necessarily sexual. It's marked by that mutual attention, helping each other out intellectually or materially, and that ongoing emotional exchange.
And the argument is that if businesses avoid this level of connection, if they keep relationships purely transactional,
Then commitment suffers.
right?
People aren't as invested, and that ultimately drags down the whole organization's effectiveness. You need that glue.
Which brings us to maybe the most visible and often riskiest expression of this connection testing: workplace flirting and attraction.
Yeah. And here, the sources really take aim at some common assumptions, some myths we tell ourselves.
Okay, let's bust some myths. What's the first one?
The classic one. Men are just biologically more interested in sex than women.
And the research says.
Interest levels are pretty much equal. That's a cultural narrative, not biological destiny.
Interesting. What else?
The idea that men are always the initiators in romantic or sexual encounters.
That feels like a strong stereotype.
It is. But the data cited in the sources suggests women actually initiate somewhere between 65% and even up to 90% of the time.
65 to 90%. That's a huge difference from the common perception.
It really is. And it points towards a fascinating power dynamic, particularly in courtship.
How so?
Culturally, women often hold significant power in that initial phase. They tend to set the preconditions for intimacy. Things like requiring genuine attraction, respect, seeing signs of commitment, maybe assessing status or resources.
Ah, so they're vetting the partner for long-term potential. Faithfulness, ability to provide, that sort of thing.
Exactly.
Huh.
It's a way of ensuring the relationship is likely to be stable and secure, effectively giving the woman a lot of control over whether and how the relationship proceeds.
Let's ground this in a workplace example. The sources mention a specific story, Ben and Haley.
Right. Ben and Haley, they worked together, developed a really close friendship. It had a kind of, fluty edge to it.
Okay.
And at one point, Haley felt the line might be blurring, so she directly addressed it. She asked him, point blank, Ben, are you flirting with me?
That takes courage. How did Ben respond?
He owned up to it, said, yeah, maybe a little bit. But critically, he also said he trusted her to tell him if it wasn't okay if she wanted him to stop.
So establishing a boundary through open communication.
Exactly. And Ben actually felt this dynamic, this honest, slightly playful connection made him better at his job.
Yeah.
More motivated, more productive.
It didn't end well, did it?
No. Despite their mutual understanding, someone else, a third-party colleague, saw it and reported Ben for unprofessional conduct.
Not Haley, the person involved, but someone else.
Right. Which perfectly highlights the inherent risk. Flirting can be positive, it can build rapport, but because it's fundamentally about testing boundaries and intentions,
Yeah.
it's incredibly vulnerable to misinterpretation or, external judgment in a structured environment like work.
So if flirting is boundary testing, what happens when things really break down? When conflict arises and discipline is involved? The sources had a pretty striking take on this.
They did. They suggested that the motive behind formal discipline often isn't just about enforcing rules rationally. It's frequently driven by an underlying emotional need.
A need for what?
A need to reduce intimacy, to push someone away because the closeness has become uncomfortable or threatening, either to one of the people directly involved or, as we saw with Ben, to an observer.
That puts a whole different spin on HR interventions.
It really does. And the hypocrisy can be quite stark. Think about that other incident involving Ben with Brenda and the manager, Harry.
Refresh my memory on that one.
Yeah. Ben invited Brenda for a drink. She apparently got upset and escalated it to Harry, the managing director. Harry ended up disciplining both of them.
Okay.
But Ben suspected Brenda's complaint wasn't entirely about the drink invitation itself. He felt it was driven by personal jealousy, describing it, and the source quotes this, as potentially a woman scorned bent on a revenge mission.
Strong words. How did the manager, Harry, react to that possibility?
He completely shut it down, dismissed it out of hand, claimed that because Brenda had consulted him first, that automatically ruled out any, messy emotional motive on her part, purely professional concern, supposedly.
Right. But the hypocrisy.
The hypocrisy is that Harry, the guy enforcing these rules and judging emotional motives, was actually married to a woman he'd initially had an affair with at work, and he later promoted her to a director role.
Wow. So his own path involved navigating exactly those kinds of complex emotional and intimate dynamics at work, yet he refused to even consider it as a factor for others.
Precisely. The emotional underpinnings of management decisions often escape the scrutiny applied to subordinates.
And this ties into that issue of the third-party accuser again, doesn't it?
Absolutely. The data highlighted in the sources indicates that formal complaints, the ones leading to serious action like firing, often don't come from the person who was supposedly harmed or made uncomfortable directly.
Like the women in the example involving Phil, who apparently didn't complain themselves.
Exactly. The intervention came from someone else who decided the behavior was inappropriate.
What does that imply about the accuser's motivation?
Well, the sources suggest it can be complex. It might not always be purely about protecting someone else. It could stem from the accuser's own feelings, maybe jealousy, maybe discomfort with their own thoughts or past actions projected onto others.
That's a really challenging idea. It complicates the narrative significantly.
It does. And it leads us into some very sensitive territory discussed in the sources
Yeah.
concerning data around accusations, specifically sexual misconduct.
Okay, this sounds like difficult ground. We need to be careful just to report what the sources found impartially.
Absolutely. This isn't about taking sides or minimizing harm, just presenting the research cited. One area looked at studies focusing specifically on why false allegations might be made.
And what did those studies suggest?
In that specific context, the findings indicated that only around 40% of the rape allegations reviewed in those particular studies were ultimately deemed substantiated or true by the investigators.
40%. That implies a significant percentage were classified differently in those specific studies.
Yes. And similarly, another survey mentioned, this one focused on sexual harassment claims, found that investigators considered about 60% of the claims they reviewed to be unjustified based on the available evidence.
60% unjustified in that survey. Again, these are specific findings from specific studies cited in the source material.
Exactly. We have to present them as part of the complex picture the sources paint, acknowledging the immense difficulty and emotional volatility involved in investigating and adjudicating these kinds of conflicts, especially where power and intimacy are intertwined.
So if the traditional disciplinary system is potentially flawed, driven by hidden emotions and sometimes external accusers, what's the alternative? How do we handle these conflicts better?
Well, the sources contrast that traditional, often authoritarian workplace model, the one that breeds fear, cynicism, and forces people to just conform.
Yeah, we've all seen aspects of that.
They contrast that with a more democratic approach.
And the prime example given is Mondragon, right? The cooperatives in Spain.
That's the one. It's a fascinating model because it flips the usual power structure.
How does it work?
The ultimate authority isn't management. It's the General Assembly, which is made up of all the workers. They elect the managers. And crucially, they have internal social councils.
What do those councils do?
Their job is specifically to monitor management, to challenge decisions, to hold them accountable. It's built-in checks and balances from the workforce itself.
And does it work? In terms of business results?
Apparently, yes. The sources state Mondragon firms are consistently about twice as productive and twice as profitable as the average Spanish company.
Twice as productive and profitable. That's remarkable.
But maybe even more important is the culture it creates, because workers have a very high degree of job security. Employment is basically guaranteed unless there's a major breach of trust. They feel safe.
Safe enough to speak up.
Exactly. They are genuinely not afraid to criticize supervisors, management, even the people they elected. There isn't that pervasive fear of reprisal.
That sounds like a foundation for real emotional honesty.
It is. And that security allows conflict to be handled more constructively, which leads to the source's main proposal for dealing with sexual disputes specifically.
Which is?
A shift away from a punishment-focused model, which tends to reward accusation and withdrawal, towards a commitment-focused model.
What does that look like in practice?
It means making mediation the standard approach, prioritizing dialogue, mutual understanding, and accountability over simply lodging a complaint and stepping back.
So encourage engagement rather than immediate escalation.
Right. And the sources go so far as to suggest that a refusal to participate in mediation, without good reason, could even be treated as a breach of the employment contract itself.
Wow, that's a strong stance. Mandating dialogue.
It is. But the idea is to shift the incentive structure towards resolution and relationship repair rather than just accusation and separation.
Okay, so pulling this all together, what's the big takeaway for you listening to this?
I think the core message is that workplace health, conflict resolution, even productivity, it's not fundamentally about rules and policies on paper.
It's about how we handle intimacy and power.
Exactly. It's about creating environments where people feel secure enough to be emotionally honest, where that honesty is treated as valuable knowledge, not a liability, and where there's genuine mutual accountability.
That feels like the path to healthier organizations and probably happier individuals within them.
Definitely. Now, we want to leave you with one final thought to chew on, something stemming from the cultural narratives we absorb.
Okay, let's hear it.
Think about hugely popular movies, things like Cold Mountain or Titanic. A recurring pattern emerges.
What pattern is that?
Often, you have a male hero who acts violently, performs great feats of protection for the female lead, and then dies.
Right, the ultimate sacrifice.
And his death often becomes the emotional peak of the romance. It elevates the relationship, confirms his love, and ensures her safety, often through his absence. It's intensely romanticized.
I see that pattern. So the provocation is,
If that narrative, male death enhancing female safety and romantic climax, is such a powerful and persistent fantasy in our culture, then we have to ask, do we collectively truly want the kind of gender equality that would require men to stop being positioned as those heroic, self-sacrificing protectors?
and require women to stop needing or seeking that kind of savior figure, especially in moments of crisis.
Exactly. Does our deep-seated cultural storytelling align with our stated goals of equality and shared responsibility? Or is there a fundamental tension there?
That is definitely something to think about, a real challenge to unpack regarding our underlying values versus our ideals.
Just some food for thought.
Indeed. Plenty to mull over until our next deep dive. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
We'll see you then.